Hi guys, welcome to competition. So in terms of the specification, we need to be able to describe what is meant by intra-specific competition, summarize the factors that different species will compete for, describe inter-specific competition, and explain how that inter-specific competition influences population size. Same bit on the spec as for predation. And here we've got a few questions to get started with. What term is used to describe populations of different species living at the same habitat? You should know it's community, all of the populations. Different species occupy different ecological niches. Remember, it's the principle, one species for one niche, and explain the advantage for that. So it's to make sure that there will be less competition for food sources, for example, food sources or for the other resources. So same stuff, okay, all over again. So the ecosystem supports a certain size of the population of species, and this is called carrying capacity. And the size of population can be affected by the effect of abiotic factors, so for example pH, water, light, and interactions between organisms, so competition and predation. So in this video we will be looking at two types of the competition. So competition, two types, okay, easy to remember. Inter-specific competition between different species. So inter, like internet, there are many different things, so that's inter-specific competition between different species. And intra-specific competition, it's the competition between same species. So intraspecific competition within a species, the same species, and they can compete with one another for the specific the same resource. So the fact if the resource is available will then determine the size of the population and will also affect the degree of the competition. So if the specific resource, let's say the light, for example, or the pH or the nutrients or whatever they want, it's optimum, there is enough for all of them, the competition will be low. But if it's becoming a limiting factor, then it's going to be larger. Okay, so another information that we need to know about intraspecific competition, it's the fact that the population of those species will increase, obviously, when the resources are plentiful. As the population increases, there will be more competing for the same amount of space and food, okay, because at the moment when the resources will increase, same at the same time will do the size of the population. But what will happen here, it's not going to be enough of the resources. So what will start happening to those resources, that will become a limiting factor. So what will happen eventually to the population size, that will decrease as well. And a smaller population then means that there is less competition here for the space and for the food. So obviously this is going to be better for growth and reproduction, so the population will start to grow again. So again, another fluctuations here. Intraspecific competition, then obviously if we're looking at the graph, coming back to what we've drawn here, they will increase again. At the end we will get the graph looking like this for the intraspecific competition. So interspecific, then internet, remember, different species, okay, so they compete for the resources like water, and one species will have a competitive advantage over the others, so could be better adapt, okay, to compete for the specific resource. So what will finally happen, they will start removing the species from that niche, because the competitive exclusion principle again will tell you that not two species can occupy the same niche, okay. So remember, one species are only for one niche, okay, and this is due to competition. So the resources are available to both populations, but if they are reduced, there will be less energy for the growth and reproduction, so both populations will become limited. So if two species are competing, okay, but one is better adapted, what will happen? Eventually, the one of those will be outcompeted, okay, because the rest of them will be better adapted to survive. Right. So the graph for the interspecific competition will look slightly different, because once the both of the populations will grow in the size, the one which is better adapted, it's going obviously to survive and reproduce, increase in the number, but the one that was less adapted due to the fact that only one population can occupy one niche, it's going to decrease. So here we've got a few questions. So similar question as we did before, what term is used to describe populations of different species living in the same habitat? So it's a community. Different species occupy different ecological niches, and what's the advantage for this? Remember, it was less competition for food sources. We've got the species which is an aquatic plant which has become a major pest of waterways in parts of the USA. Those species are not native species of the USA, and they were introduced into natural habitats from aquariums. In many freshwater habitats, it has rapidly become a dominant plant species, right? And in many freshwater habitats, it's obviously now the species a dominant plant species, and so just two reasons why. So how possibly this species could become dominant? So obviously there could be, for example, less consumers of those species, so they will outcompete. They could also outcompete others, or they could be better adapted. Okay, so they could be ideal for that niche. Right, so here we've got the table, and the scientists investigated the distribution of 3 species of fish in the lake, and they've recorded the range, okay, of depths where each species was found, and the table shows the results before. Okay, so 0 to 8.4, 6.8 to 10, so they overlap, and 7.2 to 14.6, that overlaps with the rest as well. So the question is to suggest and explain one advantage to the fish of occupying different depths. So different depths stay slightly overlapping, but they are different. And what does that tell you? Remember, one species, one niche, okay? So there will be less competition for food, okay, or food, okay, or prey or oxygen, whatever we want, or whatever resource we would like to include, will be less competition for that. Right, another graph here. We got the scientists took a sample of the waste, okay, at the start of the process, and then they took samples every 30 days, which is recorded here, 0, 30, 60, so on up to 150. This is the number of the bacteria which was involved in that process, and they figure 2 shows the changes in the number of 3 types of the bacteria in the process. So what we've got, the dark one, cocky, lighter, gram-positive rods and gram-negative rods. So what we can eventually see here in terms of the number, at the beginning, so I will start here, the first one was really high comparing to the others, but at the end of the investigation was the lowest. Gram-positive started at the similar level as gram-negative, so let's put just a circle here. And what will happen here, the gram-positive grown more than the gram-negative, but they had some increase as well. So question, okay, it's to show describe, okay, or explain. I didn't snip to the question, so explain what's causing those changes. Okay, so we describe them here, we know what's going on, but what we then need to say that the microorganism, the bacteria that was used here, changes the conditions, okay, because we've got the process and